I never thought I'd be in this situation. But life has a cruel way of testing you when you least expect it. One bad decision, one desperate moment. And suddenly I was standing in front of a man old enough to be my grandfather, about to make a choice I never thought I'd have to make. Would you have done the same? Stay with me till the end to find out what really happened. I never imagined my life would come to this. One moment I was holding on to dreams, believing that hard work would lead to success. The next, I was drowning in reality, rent overdue, my fridge empty, and eviction knocking at my door. It all happened so fast, too fast. Just 6 months ago, I had a stable job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept a roof over my head. I remember waking up to the smell of fresh coffee, my tiny apartment filled with warmth and sunlight. I had plans, big ones. Maybe I'd travel, start my own business, or at least save enough to move into a better neighborhood. But life doesn't care about your plans. The company I worked for shut down overnight. No warning, no severance. One email changed everything. I stared at my screen, rereading the words, hoping I misunderstood. But it was real. I was unemployed, and the panic set in almost instantly. At first, I believed I'd find something else quickly. I sent out resumes, made calls, went to interviews. But rejection after rejection chipped away at my confidence. Weeks turned into months, and my savings drained faster than I could count. The bills didn't stop. Rent was due, and my landlord, an older man with tired eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, was losing patience. "You've got until the end of the week," he told me one evening, standing in my doorway with his arms crossed. "I can't keep giving you more time." His words felt like a death sentence. I pleaded with him, promising I'd find a way, but we both knew the truth. I was out of options. That night I sat on my bed, staring at the eviction notice crumpled in my hands. The walls of my apartment suddenly felt smaller, closing in on me. Fear curled in my stomach, making it hard to breathe. What was I going to do? I had no family to turn to, no friends who could lend me money. The thought of sleeping on the streets sent a shiver down my spine. I wasn't strong enough for that. That's when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Hesitant, I answered. A deep, familiar voice filled my ear. "I heard you're struggling," my breath hitched. It was Martin, a man I had met once at a business event months ago. He was older, wealthy and powerful, someone completely out of my world. Why was he calling me now? "I might have a way to help," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "Meet me for dinner tonight." I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say no, but desperation is a dangerous thing. It makes you ignore the warnings in your head. And that's how, against every part of my better judgment, I found myself walking into a dimly lit restaurant, staring into the eyes of a man who would change my life forever. What happened next? Stay with me till the end to find out. The restaurant smelled like luxury, rich, warm wood and expensive cologne. As soon as I walked in, I felt out of place, like I didn't belong among the perfectly dressed couples and businessmen who whispered over their wine glasses. And then there he was. Martin. He was seated at a corner table, his silver hair gleaming under the soft light, his suit sharp and immaculate. He looked like a man who owned the world, and I was just a speck in his grand design. But when our eyes met, something in his gaze softened. There was no judgment, no pretense, just calmness. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. His voice was warm, inviting, but I could hear the unspoken tension in it. We both knew why I was here. As I sat, my nerves made my hands tremble. I tried to steady them, but nothing seemed to work. I could feel the weight of my desperation pressing against my chest, threatening to suffocate me. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, taking a sip from his glass of red wine. "I know you're in a difficult position. I've been watching your situation from afar, and I think I can help." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. The air felt thick and my heart raced. My brain screamed to say something smart, something that would make him see me as strong, independent. But I couldn't focus on anything except the overwhelming pressure of my situation. Martin continued, unfazed by my silence. "I'm offering you a way out. You don't need to struggle anymore, not if you don't want to." I couldn't help but look at him, trying to read his face. What was he offering me? Was this a job? Some kind of miracle? He leaned back in his chair, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Let me be clear, I can take care of your rent, no questions asked." A wave of relief hit me, so strong that I almost forgot where I was. My chest loosened for the first time in months, and I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. But then he said it, his voice low, deliberate, and without hesitation. "All I ask in return is your company." For one night, I froze. My pulse shot up, and for a split second I thought I had misheard him, but the look in his eyes told me that I hadn't. "You want me to—" My voice faltered, and I couldn't finish the sentence. He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. "Spend the night with me. That's the arrangement. Your rent will be paid, and you won't have to worry about anything else. No strings, no commitments, just one night." The words hit me like a slap to the face. My heart pounded in my chest as shock and disbelief swirled inside me. How could he? How could anyone ask for such a thing? I felt sick. And yet something deep inside me was fighting to make sense of it all. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to get up, to leave and never look back. But the other part of me, the one struggling, the one who had no options left, whispered, "This is your chance." I opened my mouth to say no, to walk out of that restaurant and never look back, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was dry and my mind spun. "Think about it," Martin said, as if reading my thoughts. "You don't have to decide now, just understand that I'm offering a way out, a way to make all of this go away." I wanted to scream, to tell him that no amount of money, no offer, was worth my dignity. But the truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of losing my home, my sense of security. The thought of wandering the streets, of being homeless, filled me with dread. "Come to my hotel tonight if you decide," he said, placing a hotel keycard in front of me. "I'll be waiting." For a moment the world seemed to stand still. I stared at the keycard, my fingers trembling as I ran them over the edge. The weight of the decision pressed down on me, suffocating me. I didn't want to say yes, I didn't want to become that person, the one who does whatever it takes to survive. But the harsh reality of my situation was clear, and I couldn't escape it. I looked up at him, trying to read his face, but his expression remained calm, unreadable. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled slightly, as if he already knew my answer. "Take your time," he said, standing up. "I'll be here." And just like that he was gone, leaving me alone in the silence of my thoughts, the keycard sitting on the table between us like a lifeline, and a chain that could tie me to a future I wasn't sure I wanted. Would I go? Would I sacrifice everything for survival? Stay with me till the end to find out what happened next. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at that damn keycard, its glossy surface reflecting the dim light from the restaurant's chandelier. It was so simple, so innocuous. And yet, in that moment, it felt like the weight of the entire world rested on my shoulders. One night, just one night, and my problems would be gone. But that's where the problem lay, wasn't it? It seemed so easy, so tempting, a quick fix, a way out, a way to escape this suffocating mess that had become my life. But the cost felt unbearable. I tried to push the thought out of my mind, but it kept creeping back. The bills piling up, the eviction notice I had hidden in my drawer, the cruel ticking of the clock. I glanced around the restaurant, pretending to enjoy the clink of wine glasses, the low hum of conversations. But inside I was screaming. My stomach churned with a mix of guilt, fear, and something else I couldn't quite name. What kind of person would I be if I agreed to this? A woman who traded her dignity for rent money? A woman who bent to the weight of her desperation? Was that who I was now? I closed my eyes and tried to imagine the alternative, sleeping in my car, on a friend's couch, or worse, on the streets. The thought of it sent a wave of panic through me. I couldn't do that. I couldn't be that person. But then, another voice whispered, softer than the first, "It's just one night. It's just a small price to pay. Just this once." I could already feel the pull of the decision, like gravity pulling me towards something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The minutes dragged on. I was still sitting at that table, frozen in time, torn between two paths. One led to survival, financial security, freedom from fear. The other led to something I didn't want to think about. I turned the keycard over in my hand, the cold plastic biting into my skin. I thought about all the times I had struggled to stay afloat, times when I had been so proud, so sure of myself. And now, here I was, holding a key to a hotel room in exchange for something I couldn't take back. Could I live with that choice? Would I be able to look at myself in the mirror tomorrow? Or would I hate myself? Martin's words echoed in my head. Think about it. And I did. For hours. All night. Eventually my mind started to settle on one thought. I had no other choice. I had nothing else left. I couldn't stand the idea of being homeless, of losing everything. I couldn't face the uncertainty, the endless nights of wondering where I'd sleep, how I'd survive. One night, and everything would change. But as I walked out of the restaurant that night, the weight of the decision was still heavy on my chest. I thought I was doing the right thing, surviving, making the best of a bad situation. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, "Is this the price of survival?" I didn't know the answer. Later that evening I found myself standing outside the hotel. The neon lights flickered above me, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. My heart was pounding, my thoughts racing. What am I doing? The hotel looked luxurious, almost too perfect for someone like me. I felt small, insignificant, like I didn't belong in a place like this. But then I remembered, this was all about survival. With a shaky breath, I walked inside. My fingers were ice cold as I approached the reception desk and asked for the room Martin had reserved for me. The clerk didn't ask any questions. He simply handed me the keycard with a polite smile, as if he'd seen this sort of thing 1,000 times before. I made my way to the elevator, my legs unsteady beneath me. Each floor felt like it was taking me deeper into a world I didn't know, a world I wasn't sure I wanted to be a part of. When I finally reached the room, I hesitated before knocking. My breath caught in my throat. Was I really going to do this? Was I really about to walk into that room knowing what would happen next? But then I heard the sound of footsteps from the other side of the door. I didn't have time to second-guess myself anymore. The door opened, and there he was. Martin. His presence filled the room, calm and commanding, but there was something else in his eyes. A flicker of curiosity, maybe. "You came," he said, his voice almost soft. I nodded, unable to speak. The silence between us was thick, but I could feel the tension crackling in the air. And then, Martin did something that surprised me. He didn't rush me, didn't try to move too quickly. Instead, he gave me space. "I don't want you to feel pressured," he said, his tone gentle. "This is your choice completely, there's no rush." I wanted to scream, I wanted to run away, but instead I stood there, frozen. The room seemed to shrink, and the weight of the decision hung over me. There was no turning back now. Would I give in to my desperation? Would I do what I had to do to survive? Only time would tell. The door clicked softly behind me as I stepped into the hotel room, and the quiet was overwhelming. The space was too large, too quiet, and too perfect. Everything in the room, silk curtains, polished wood furniture, soft lighting, felt out of place with the chaos inside my head. It was as though this room, this moment, existed in a different reality. A reality where I didn't feel broken, desperate, and utterly out of control. I took a few steps inside, my heels clicking against the marble floor, and then stopped. My stomach twisted into knots, tight and uncomfortable, like I was about to step onto the edge of a cliff and leap into the unknown. The air felt heavy, thick with unsaid things. I looked around the room, trying to distract myself from the fact that the man who had made this offer was standing just a few feet away, waiting for me to make my move. The large bed loomed in the centre of the room, white sheets pulled taut across the mattress, as if everything had been prepared just for this moment. Martin stood near the window, his back turned to me as he looked out over the city I no longer recognised. My eyes flicked over him, trying to read his posture, his expression. Was he waiting for me to say something? Was he just as uncertain as I was? But then he spoke, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "You don't have to do this." I froze. His words didn't make sense at first. Was he giving me an out? After everything he said, was he really letting me walk away? The faintest hint of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe there was still a chance to leave. Maybe I could take that keycard and leave without saying a word. But the hope was fleeting. I looked down at my hands, trembling with fear of judgment, fear of my own decision, fear of what would happen if I didn't make it through the night. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered, the question slipping out before I could stop it. I needed to understand. Why was he offering this to me? Was it because he wanted to control me? To break me down and watch me fall apart? He turned slowly, his face unreadable. "Because I can." His words were simple, but there was an edge to them, something deeper, something I couldn't grasp. "And because you need it." I didn't argue with him. What could I say? He was right. I did need it. I was already sinking so fast into a world where everything was slipping through my fingers. My job was gone. My dignity felt like it was already gone. Maybe this was the last lifeline I could grab onto. I bit my lip, trying to steady myself. I had to make a choice. "I'm not going to force you into anything you don't want," Martin added, his voice calm but insistent. "But I'm not going to pretend I don't know why you're here." The room felt like it was closing in on me, like the walls were moving closer with every breath I took. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw myself out that door and never look back. But I couldn't. Could I? I needed this. I needed to survive. "Okay," I said, barely above a whisper. The word barely left my mouth before the air seemed to shift. The tension that had been hanging between us broke, and for the first time I felt like I was actually making a decision. Not just reacting to circumstances, not just letting life drag me wherever it wanted to go. I watched as Martin's gaze softened slightly, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. There was something strange in his eyes, a mix of understanding and something else I couldn't name. He stepped closer to me, moving with slow precision, like he was giving me space to pull away. But I didn't move. I didn't know what I expected, but it wasn't the warmth that radiated from him when he gently reached out and touched my arm. His hand was steady, reassuring in a way that made me feel like I was tethered to something solid, something safe. "You're not just a transaction," he said quietly, his voice low. "This isn't just about money. You're worth more than that." The words stunned me. I blinked, feeling the weight of his statement settle in my chest. I wasn't used to hearing things like that. I wasn't used to hearing someone treat me like more than a problem to be fixed, more than a fleeting need to be fulfilled. I didn't know how to respond. My heart was still racing, the adrenaline pulsing through my veins. I felt like I was floating in some weird, disconnected space where my thoughts didn't make sense, and my feelings were tangled in a knot I couldn't unravel. Martin stepped back and ran a hand through his silver hair, his eyes never leaving mine. He didn't rush me, didn't push me forward. He just waited. And that waiting, his patience, was both terrifying and comforting. It made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in so long, but it also made me feel small, weak even. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest tighten again. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to fight this, walk away, reclaim control of my life. The next few hours felt like they belonged to someone else. I moved through them, disconnected, like a ghost watching a life I couldn't recognize. It wasn't the night I'd expected. It was quieter, gentler than I had imagined. No force, no pressure. Just two people, both of us trying to figure out who we were in that moment. After it was over, we didn't say much. Martin wasn't the type to rush through these things, and neither was I. There was a strange kind of silence between us, one that wasn't uncomfortable, but heavy. I sat on the edge of the bed, unsure of what to do with myself. My skin still felt strange, my body exhausted, but there was something else, a numbness, a cold detachment from everything that had led me here. I didn't know how to process what had just happened. Was it a mistake? Or had I made the only choice that kept me from falling apart entirely? Martin sat at the desk across the room, watching me. His eyes were calm, patient, but there was something unreadable in his gaze, as if he was waiting for me to speak. He didn't push, didn't rush me into anything. It was as if he understood that I needed time, and for a moment I wanted to leave. I wanted to run away from the whole thing, from the confusion, from the quiet judgment I felt in my own heart. I wanted to forget what I had done. But then I looked down at the keycard sitting on the bedside table, the reflection of the city lights glimmering off its surface. I had walked in here with nothing but desperation, and I was walking out with something I wasn't sure how to handle, relief maybe, but also a deep, gnawing uncertainty. I had crossed a line, and though I wasn't proud of how I'd gotten here, a small part of me couldn't help but feel that I had taken control of my life, however strange the circumstances. I stood up, my legs unsteady, my mind still swirling with questions. Was I stronger for having done this? Or had I lost something along the way that could never be regained? Martin was still watching me, but he wasn't looking at me with pity or judgment. There was something else in his eyes, something softer. "I know you're struggling with this," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the room, "but you don't have to do it alone." His words lingered in the air, and for the first time that night I felt the walls around me start to shift. I wasn't just a woman who'd made a choice to survive. I wasn't just a deal or a transaction. I was a person. And he wasn't asking for anything more than I was willing to give. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about dominance. It was about survival. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered, unsure of what else to say. For the first time that night, I felt a weight lift from my chest, even though I didn't quite know what it meant. I walked out of the hotel room slowly, the weight of the world still pressing down on me, but in a different way. It wasn't the crushing pressure of hopelessness anymore. It was the weight of a decision made, a choice taken out of necessity, not desire. And maybe that was what mattered. Maybe there was no shame in doing what you had to do to survive, even if it was uncomfortable. Maybe we weren't always as in control as we wanted to be, but we could still find a way forward. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the city seemed different somehow. The lights weren't just reflections in the glass anymore. They felt like possibilities, flickering, uncertain, but there. And as I walked away from the hotel, I realized something. Survival didn't mean losing yourself. It didn't mean giving up. It meant fighting through the darkness, even when you weren't sure what would happen next. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know where life was going to take me after that night. But I knew this. I wasn't giving up. And that, somehow, made all the difference. If you've ever faced a tough choice, one that made you question who you are, remember, you're never alone. Keep fighting. Some choices change us forever. Choose wisely.